When the White House announced today that they would not be releasing any photographs of Osama bin Laden that were taken after U.S. forces killed him on Sunday, the news was received pretty positively across the political spectrum in Washington. The Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee is one of the few people who have actually seen any of the imagery the White House was considering releasing. His name is Mike Rogers. He's a Republican congressman from Michigan. And even before the White House announcement today about the photos, Congressman Rogers put out a statement urging today that they not be released. He said, quote, Osama bin Laden is not a trophy. He is dead. And let's now focus on continuing the fight until al-Qaeda has been eliminated. The risk of release outweighs the benefits. There is a real risk that releasing the photos will only serve to inflame public opinion in the Middle East. Republican Congressman Peter King, who's chair of the House Homeland Security Committee, he's been critical of President Obama on practically everything related to national security. He was also the chairman who was quite unmoved by criticism that he'd be needlessly inflaming anti-Muslim sentiment here in the U.S. with his religiously charged radicalism hearings in his committee. But even that Peter King, in saying today that he disagreed with the president's decision about the photos, even Peter King said today that he respected the president's decision, that it was the president's decision to make, and he said that he would, quote, not oppose it. The one substantive and strong objection to President Obama's decision from a mainstream Republican today came from Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Senator Graham made this argument. He said, quote, the whole purpose of sending our soldiers into the compound rather than an aerial bombardment was to obtain indisputable proof of bin Laden's death. I know bin Laden is dead, but the best way to protect and defend our interests overseas is to prove that fact to the rest of the world. I'm afraid the decision made today by President Obama will unnecessarily prolong this debate. That is I think, a rational and well-argued statement from Senator Graham. The problem with that argument is that his hypothesis has been tested in the past. His argument that the U.S. should provide photos to indisputably prove that this death happened, that was the justification the George W. Bush administration used when they chose to release post-death photos of Saddam Hussein's two sons back in 2003.
These two individuals are particularly vicious individuals. They are now dead. We know that. They have been carefully identified. The Iraqi people have been waiting for confirmation of that. And they, in my view, deserved having confirmation of that.
Was the release of the dead photographs of Uday and Qusay, was that confirmation for the Iraqi people that they were in fact dead? Well, here's how Richard Engel reported on that question for NBC Nightly News when the Uday and Qusay photos were released. One quick word of warning here. Richard's report here does contain shots of the fairly graphic photos in question.
No way I'm convinced, says this man. I'm 100% unconvinced. We asked others in the store to raise their hands if they were equally doubtful. These men thought the pictures, especially the one of Saddam's older son Uday, shot in the mouth, just don't look right. Uday was known to be thin with a close beard. This picture shows him with a shaved head, swollen face, and a long beard. People here thought the photo of his brother, Qusay, was a closer match. Why didn't they take the photographs right away, asked this man, before they got all bloated? The pictures were doctored on a computer, he charges.
Doctored on a computer. If releasing gruesome photographs of dead bodies was accepted as indisputable proof that the people in those pictures are in fact dead, then that could be a good argument for releasing the bin Laden photos now. But if even 8 years ago in that shop in Baghdad, people had enough awareness about photoshopping technology to be suspicious of any photo that proved something that they didn't want to believe for whatever reason, then the good you can accomplish by releasing one of these photos is diminished. And you have to weigh that diminished good against any potential bad consequences that could come from putting the photographs out. 3 years after the Uday and Qusay photos were released, the U.S. government did something like that again after they killed the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. The Iraq war has been a war that's had a lot of strange press conferences, a lot of strange made-for-TV moments. whether it be the made-for-TV tearing down of the Saddam Hussein statue in Baghdad's Firdos Square, or the really well-choreographed tours of Saddam's former palaces that were offered by the United States military. There have been some strange scenes out of the Iraq War beamed to American televisions. But one of the strangest made-for-TV moments of the entire Iraq War was this one. Do you remember this visual? Remember this? This was the press conference back in 2006 when the U.S. made a huge show of revealing the photo that was taken of Zarqawi's face after he was killed. Somewhat inexplicably, officials there chose to put the close-up picture of Zarqawi's dead face in kind of an ornate gold-colored frame. All of the pageantry and puffery around the importance of Zarqawi's death essentially had the effect of making him a much more well-known figure in death than he had been in life. The triumphalist unveiling of the big gold-framed "We Got Him" photo was followed very shortly thereafter by this.
The sign here says, "The wedding of the martyr." For the people here, Zarqawi is a hero who has gone to paradise. Children chase us away from the mourning tent with stones and rocks, chanting, "God is great." Here, at least, Zarqawi is a hero.
The martyrdom celebration for the previously not all that well-known Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Later that same year, after Saddam Hussein was executed, images that were released from that event also ended up doing recognizable harm. A gory cell phone video was leaked of that execution. It featured Shiite sectarian chants directed at Saddam Hussein before he was hanged. Here is the audio of that scene. I'm not going to show you the rest of the video, but it goes on to show Saddam Hussein, of course a Sunni, being hanged by Shiites who are yelling sectarian things at him. When they're yelling Muqtada, 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 that is a reference to Muqtada al-Sadr, one of Saddam Hussein's main opponents in Iraq, a Shiite religious figure. The release of that video was, to say the least, not helpful to Iraq's bloody sectarian divide at the time. Now, 4 years later, President Obama has the ultimate trophy photo, if he wants to make it that, of the world's most recognizable terrorist, the man the United States has been hunting for 10 years. Here's how he explained to the CBS program 60 Minutes today why his decision is that the images of bin Laden should not be released.
Did you see the pictures?
Yes.
What was your reaction when you saw them?
It was him.
Why haven't you released them?
You know, we discussed this internally. Keep in mind that we are absolutely certain this was him. We've done DNA sampling and testing. And so there is no doubt that we killed Osama bin Laden. It is important for us to make sure that very graphic photos of somebody who was shot in the head are not floating around as an incitement to additional violence, as a propaganda tool. You know, that's not who we are.
That's not who we are. Mr. Obama went on to say, we don't trot out this stuff as trophies. We don't need to spike the football. The president making essentially an ethical point of why he chose not to release those photos and saying that's not who we are, but also making a couple of strategic points. One, that what he described as very graphic photos of somebody who was shot in the head do not become an incitement to further violence against the United States or something that could be used as propaganda by the followers of Osama bin Laden. But also to Senator Lindsey Graham's criticism that I mentioned earlier, that indisputable proof be provided of bin Laden's death. Mr. Obama arguing today, quote, "We don't think that a photograph in and of itself is going to make any difference. There are going to be some folks who deny it." Releasing a photograph, releasing any kind of factual evidence is not going to quell people who are invested in a conspiracy theory that serves their own purposes. This is something that we can intuitively understand. It's also something that Mr. Obama understands personally from very, very, very recent experience in a very different context.
For some reason, there's a green border around it that had to be photoshopped in. I'm trying to figure out why they would do that.
Well, this whole border is suspect. I mean, if you're taking a scan of something, it would, to your point, it would be white.
Hey, listen, it may or may not be, but certainly opens up the can of worms that there are at least questions for it.
Joining us now is P.J. Crowley. He is the former spokesman for the United States State Department. He served in that job until this past March when he resigned after having criticized the conditions of confinement of the WikiLeaks suspect, U.S. Army Private Bradley Manning. Mr. Crowley, it's really nice to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Rachel.
You are intimately familiar with all the players who have been involved in these decisions. What do you think the decision-making process was like on this issue of the bin Laden photos?
Well, inside the government, there's a concept of strategic communication. And we know that these photographs or videos, as you just detailed,